But hello, I'm Sean Schmidt. I'm a product designer at Duolingo. I'm just curious, has anyone heard of Duolingo before? Awesome. Has anyone used it? All right. Who's fluent in the language because of Duolingo? All right, that's what we're trying to fix. But for those of you that don't know, Duolingo is a free language learning platform. We try to tackle the big, complicated challenge of learning a language and make it into a bite-sized, digestible, fun activity. So we have a few apps. We try to make it as gamified as possible. So a little bit about why we're interested in this space. There are 1.2 billion people around the world that are learning a foreign language. This is a huge market. Of that 1.2 billion people, 800 million of them are learning a new language to get a better job. Typically, these people are in a low socioeconomic position where learning a new language can immediately help them improve their livelihood. Learning English in particular can often get them into a better position. Historically, learning a language has been an incredibly expensive endeavor. Software that exists out there, I'm sure you've heard of Rosetta Stone and others, can cost up to $500, $1,000 for one language course. Certifying that you speak a language can cost $500. Many of you have heard of the TOEFL exam. That is a very expensive monopoly, private monopoly. Depending on the exam location, it could cost $300 for the exam, plus you have to travel to a testing facility, pay for airfare, lodging. Especially internationally, that can be really expensive, almost a month's worth of wages. And at Duolingo, we see a problem with this, and that's why our mission is to provide free language access to anyone for free, the highest quality. And we'll never charge for that. And I think that is a pretty ambitious goal, something we're working really hard on. You might have read the title of the talk. I was a bit ambitious. We don't have 100 million users yet. When I was asked a few weeks ago to come up with the title, I thought we could get there. As of this morning, we have 93 million, so we're really close. At this clip, we'll probably hit 100 million in the next 4 weeks, which is really exciting. To put that into further perspective, there are more people learning on Duolingo than are learning a language in the whole US school system. That is only possible because of technology, and I think that's really fascinating. It's a problem that we are trying to scale. Typically, learning a language was a one-on-one or 1-to-30 experience, and it was hugely dependent on human interaction. So we're trying to take something that was historically based around humans, interacting with humans, and trying to see how far we can scale this problem. So I have a little clip for you. It came out a few weeks ago. It was actually a TED Talk. And this is showcasing, this is just one of the 93 million learners out there. His name is Jimmy. That was pretty cool to see. And I'd like to have you meet him.
Jimmy, please welcome me on stage.
Hello.
So tell me about yourself, Jimmy.
Hi everybody, my name is Jimmy. I'm 12 years old and I really like to play video games and read books.
So how did you learn English?
I learn English by practicing and reading, listening. I already end the program Duolingo. I'm practicing in videos, Skype, and writing on WhatsApp.
So he was having a fluent conversation. I speak Spanish. The conversation was easier had in English than it was in Spanish because his conversational English is so good. And tell me, how much English did you know 8 months ago?
Oh, I learned 8 months ago, or March of the last year.
And how much did you know 8 months ago?
Nothing.
thought that was pretty cool. So we have Jimmy here. No, I'm kidding.
What is the TED Talk called? Something.
It's. I want to say it's something to the effect of, what if we gave computers to everyone in the world, or I can look it up. I can find out for you.
I don't want to move.
All right. So who's behind Duolingo? We're based out in Pittsburgh. We're actually in Shadyside. We were born and raised in Pittsburgh. We actually started out of Carnegie Mellon. Originally, it was a research project by a computer science professor named Luis Fanon. You might recognize some of his work. He's responsible for projects such as CAPTCHA and reCAPTCHA. Now, is anyone familiar with why there are two words on the screen and not one? Actually, so one of the whole idea of the project was to address the issue of hacking and spamming. Yahoo ran into this issue where they found out that thousands of accounts were being created by programs, and these email accounts were then spamming millions of people. So Yahoo wanted to limit or make it more difficult for all these hackers to create these spam accounts. So one means of addressing that issue was requiring somebody to decipher a distorted character in the sign-up flow. That way, we realized only humans are good enough to identify these distorted characters, and therefore we could ensure that only humans are creating these email accounts. After realizing it wasted so much human effort, it takes 10 seconds to do one of these things, over 200 million times, it wastes a ton of time for humanity. He started to think about, all right, how can we take this human effort for something good? So now when you're typing in two words, one is to first verify that you're a human. The second word is a scanned image of an old book. And the idea is, as you're verifying that yourself as a human, you're also helping digitize old books. And now Google has been able to digitize hundreds of thousands of old books. You can now find them and search through them. But this was a really exciting project for him. It got him to think about, all right, how can we crowdsource little bits of human effort to achieve something really massive? And this was a huge inspiration for Duolingo as a project. How can we teach the world in many different languages? How can we do that at a very scalable way? And this whole concept of addressing large issues, but coming up with a scalable solution is really driven the way we build things at Duolingo. So Duolingo, we're a small company, we're about 40 people. We're staffed with a lot of software engineers, machine learning experts, language specialists, designers, marketing folks. That's me. So a little bit about what Duolingo actually is. At the moment, we offer 60 different language courses. And I'll define a course as a language direction. So learning Spanish from English is one of the course directions. We're constantly adding new languages every week. As a way to prioritize, we often like to teach the learning English direction first. We see there's larger demand globally to learn English than there is to go the opposite way. Everyone is hungry to learn Japanese, Arabic, Korean, Chinese. And we are too. We want to get those courses out. But it's no coincidence that those are also the most difficult languages to create courses for. Last week we did add support for Klingon. This is not a joke. So hopefully in a few months there will be a Duolingo course where you can learn Klingon from English. All right, so Duolingo, we have a few different products. We're on iOS, Android, Windows Phone, and on the web. Last year we were selected by Apple to be their Apple App of the Year. Also Google Play's Best of the Best. Those are huge honors for us. Really excited about that. If you're not familiar with how Duolingo looks, these are a few shots of the basic structure. This is iOS in particular. But we take a language, in this case it's Italian, we break it down into what we call skills. So at the top, there's basics 1, we have skills on food, verbs, transportation. We break it down, each lesson, into each skill into lessons, and on the right side, that's a screenshot of what a typical lesson looks like. Each lesson usually can be completed in about 5 minutes. This is a screenshot of Duolingo on the internet. I personally work on this one, so I'm quite proud of it. So we have Duolingo as a learning app, and those are 2 shots. We recently launched something called the Duolingo Test Center, and I was kind of alluding to this. The TOEFL exam is one example of a really expensive way to certify your language proficiency. We saw a problem with that, especially when we like to think that most of the world that's trying to learn English and certify that they can speak English cannot afford a $500 exam. Instead, we are developing a test on our own. It costs $20 instead of $500. It is about a 20-minute exam. It's adaptive, so if you're proving your proficiency pretty early on, it'll be a shorter exam. It's available on Android, iOS, and the web. The whole time we are recording your screen, so we know you're not switching into other apps to cheat. We're recording via your webcam. Each exam is proctored by a human on the other end. And with this, we're seeing extremely high correlations with existing exams like the TOEFL. And we're having some good success with organizations, and many universities are starting to accept it as well. Our last product that we just launched in January is called the Duolingo Dashboard. Something we noticed was Duolingo was being used in many schools, in many companies. Duolingo was originally conceived to be a personal tutor. So we never thought, this is something that would enter a classroom because we thought teachers were there. This was intended to be for someone who had no other resources around to use Duolingo. But it was great. We saw a lot of pictures on Twitter of classrooms with iPads using Duolingo. Companies were informing all their employees to use Duolingo. And we decided to create some tools to support that kind of use. We invented the dashboard. At a glance, a teacher or an administrator can observe how their students are doing. And this is a really powerful tool. And at the moment, we have 1,500 teachers worldwide using this. And the product's still in its infancy, but it's getting some good traction. So how did Duolingo start? This is a little story about our journey from 0 to 100 million. Originally, Duolingo had no language experts. And this is pretty crazy for a company that is coming in trying to revolutionize language education. And I really mean that. Luis was our CEO and founder. He spoke Spanish and English, and that was pretty much the extent of our bilingual expertise. We didn't have any learning specialists, psychologists, anything. We had a few hunches, and that was it. To their credit, they did try to do some research, so they read a lot of books. But they quickly realized that one book was claiming to be the best, the other book was claiming to be the best. Has anyone tried to take on a diet before? You might notice that every diet claims to be the best diet. They kind of realized that with language education also. But they tried to synthesize what were some best practices, and they integrated that. So they didn't just blindly ignore these books. So they took bits and pieces and started to create the product. Thankfully, after a few months, they gained a sizable enough user base. And we could start shifting the approach to be more data-driven. And I think this was a fundamental part in the Duolingo history. Instead of making a lot of product decisions based off of opinion or what they believe is the best, it started to become very clear with using data. Now we A/B test every feature. So there's no feature that goes to all our users without some kind of scientific method being applied to it. Does anyone know what an A/B test is? Okay, a good amount. Basically, an A/B test is science. It's taking the scientific method to product development. In a nutshell, it's saying, all right, if I wanted to make a change, introduce a feature or alter an existing feature, I would leave the Duolingo experience as it is for half of our users, and for the other half, introduce this new variation. It could be as simple as, all right, what if our mascot was red instead of green? We would, make Duo remain green for half of our users, make Duo red for the other half, and observe what changes. And the things we like to observe for have been things like retention. If a user comes to Duolingo today, how likely are they going to come back tomorrow or the day after or the day after? We like to observe things like click-through rate. So if we're making a change to our splash page, are people clicking that button as many times as they did in the false condition? And this approach also went into a lot of our learning content. We were able to do things like switch around the order of our skills. And this is kind of how we went from mimicking a book to really coming into our own methodology for teaching. A lot of this is just purely data-driven. We would, this is a really dumbed-down example, but what if we flipped phrases in Basics 2? We would just do it and see what happens. Are people coming back as often? Are people learning more words? Are people sharing on social media anymore? And this methodology really is so core to the way we build features. It's dangerous for us to think why not having this kind of setup. And the reason is there's so much variance. You can't launch a new feature on one day and observe the difference on the next day. This is an example of how we're observing some metrics. And in this case, an experiment is not doing very well. On the bottom here, you can see this variance, and that's just day after day. And we know that on some days people come to Duolingo, and some days they don't. Specifically, Sunday through Thursday we have high traffic, but Friday and Saturday, for some reason they don't want to learn Spanish. I don't get it. But it's important that we run these two versions of every test all the time, because no matter what can happen, whether it's a day of the week or there could be a national holiday or some other event locally that can disrupt both buckets. But if we're constantly having these two buckets running at all times, we can ensure that whatever decision we come up to at the end, we know for a fact that this test succeeded or failed. All right, so how do we build new features? Our ideas for new features or changes to features come from anywhere. Whether it's an employee that is really passionate about a new idea, oftentimes it's from our existing users. Thankfully, our users are very passionate about our product and very vocal, and we give them the tools to express their opinion. On our website, we have a very lively discussion forum, in which we kind of got the idea for creating a tool for schools, which is a lot of teachers logged onto our forum were telling us stories about how they're using Duolingo in their classroom, and they had ideas and for something that would make their life easier in the classroom, and we listened. After coming up with an idea, we are really low fidelity. This is an actual picture of the first time we decided to create a schools product, which is on a whiteboard, me and an engineer, just doodling some ideas, erasing, drawing arrows left and right. But it really is just to start thinking about the concept and not getting distracted by the design or the engineering effort that could be involved, working out some of the flows, asking someone else to come over and take a look at it, inviting a teacher to come over and walk through the flow on a whiteboard. It's a very low fidelity process, but it's so cheap to change. Like if you're not investing any design or engineering resources into an initiative, you can just erase it and try it over again. But if you're sitting down and coding or sketching or coming up with Photoshop mock-ups, you've wasted weeks and days of effort, and it's way more taxing to go back and change it up. So I highly encourage this really low fidelity process. Assuming we get somewhere that we like, we go into a design iteration. Depending on the product, the next design iteration could be just sketching on a piece of paper or doing some wireframes. A lot of the time, since we have our brand style really honed in and defined, we jump into high fidelity. I believe Facebook is also famous for doing this, not getting into wireframes but going into high fidelity. And we iterate on this a lot, and it's the iteration feedback loop comes from showing another designer, showing an engineer, inviting strangers into our office, showing them our new designs, asking them to go through some flows, being very open and welcome to criticism. This is one particular screen. I think there were at least 30 different iterations of this one thing, and really all we're trying to do is get you to click on this button or this button. But there was dramatic differences in how it was presented. It was duo the owl present at all? Is he coming from the top or the bottom? Is he in the speech bubble or is he not? Should we even show the skills behind it? All these were things that we're trying out, but the whole time we're thinking about, does it maintain our brand? Is it still playful? Are we highlighting the things that are still important on the screen? Are we conveying delight? Are we conveying trustworthiness? I think this test is still going on, but I want to say we've ended up with this design. Here's another example of how detailed we get. So this is one of our speak challenges. You'll hear an audio clip and then have to type in what you just heard. But we realized it was sometimes confusing what language you're supposed to type in. Because you'll hear something and sometimes you want to translate what you just heard, or sometimes just want to type in what you just heard in that language. So we were deciding, it would be great if we could give you a hint of what language we're expecting, and if that could happen in a flag, well, what location and what shape would the flag make the most sense? And this is something we've been iterating on. So after the design, we go into development, and we have a really talented team of back-end, front-end developers who are also very active and vocal in the design process. So it's not a complete waterfall when they're handed a mock-up and they just have to pound it out. They have a very big voice in the decision process. So by the time we get to the implementation, nothing's a surprise. They know what they're building. And oftentimes, as they see the design early on, they're thinking in their head how they could implement farther down the road. Depending on the feature, we also have a machine learning team. So sometimes if it's just an aesthetic change, they don't have to get involved. But if we're thinking about changing the fundamental parts of our lessons, we'll also include them. Before we launch anything, we go through a very rigorous quality assurance process. And we do this because core to our mission is to provide free language education to anyone for free. And anyone is a key word. We know that not everyone in the world has access to the latest and greatest devices. So we try to keep our backlog of legacy devices as, we want Duolingo to run on those older devices just as well. So we have a huge wall of all these devices, even iPod touches. Does anyone still use an iPod touch? Duolingo should be able to run on that. But yeah, QA testing is really important because we want as many people to use our app as possible. At the same time, we want people to trust that our app is giving them the best experience. And if they're getting a bug-free experience, there's more trust in the brand. After launch, we observe the results. I showed you before what things we like to look at. But the metrics are really important. User feedback is always important. For us, building features is never a race. It's a fitness plan. Like there's no one goal. We're constantly iterating and improving on the next thing. So it's great if we improve retention, or if more people come back, or more people are learning more words. But then what's the next step? What did we do right that we could improve on? What did we do wrong that we could learn from? It's a constant iteration. This is one example of our homepage. For a while on the web, we were, I don't know the exact number, let's say it's 10%, but for a while we're getting 10% of the people that hit the page will sign up. And that's a number we're constantly trying to improve, because that's the beginning of our funnel. But no matter what we do, we're never really moving the needle, because 10% always has seemed to be like the maximum we could get. So we tried, this is an example of an A, B, C, D test. And really the goal here is just to get as many people to sign up for Duolingo. Can anyone guess which one ended up winning out? Yeah.
Well, because I just got onto it recently.
Top right. Okay. very
It
smart.
took me to figure out that the get started would take me to a page,
Yeah.
because I had to log all my students on.
Okay.
So it took me a while to figure out, oh, okay, if I go to the get started, then I choose the language, sign them in.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So yeah, she's right. The top right one was the winning design.
So I cheated, I knew.
The bottom left was our second place, and the other two were not really in contention. But we certainly had a lot of learnings here, which was, you know, if there's one clear call to action on the screen, you'll drive click rate better. I think as designers and product people, we want to feel like the user needs to know as much about the product as possible. So we spent all this time creating these crafty lines, these paragraphs, showing all the flags. It would be great if we had all the monuments. And since we're so passionate about the product, we have all these ideas, but really it was, all right, there's a big green button on a big black background. People are doing that more often. So I guess if there's one takeaway is, you know, a lot of the times the answers are so simple. And I bet if I gave you these 4 designs and we had an art director and a big room of critiques, opinions will prevail. The loudest voice will win. But if you put these 4 designs in a very scientific way, really all you have to do is look at the numbers and see which one wins. And I think that in an organization, that's really great to know that, all right, anyone can have a great idea, but ultimately we know based off the numbers what will be best for the user experience. And I think that approach has been really successful for us. All right, so some design challenges that are unique to our product. Again, we are teaching languages. It's a very difficult, long process, and we wanted to make it as addictive and enjoyable and pleasurable as possible. So one thing we decided to do was have no more losing. It was a radical idea for us. If you are familiar with the Duolingo experience, you might be familiar with our 3 hearts there. So the idea was each lesson has 20 challenges. You have 3 hearts. With each challenge you get it wrong, you lose a heart. And if you lose all your hearts, you have to repeat the lesson again. And this was really great. We stuck with it for 2 years. And it was a core part of our game mechanics. Actually, a little side note about the 3 hearts. We noticed that in our first lesson, you might notice there are 4 hearts. And before, it was a lot of people were dropping off early on in the Duolingo experience. And we realized if we could give them 1 extra heart, they'll come back way more. But then if we reduce it down to 3, that's okay. And even arriving at that 3 heart thing was a big deal. 5 was too many, 2 was too little, 3 was good. But for the first skill, we'll give you 4 hearts because that was the right amount. But we decided, all right, let's try something out. What if you could never lose? There are no hearts. If you got something right, that's great. The progress bar will fill up. If you got something wrong, you'll lose some progress. And the lesson will be more adaptive. And we saw that there was a lot of gains here. People were coming back more. We noticed that since they weren't losing, they wouldn't abandon the site. It always felt like you were winning. It would just take you a little longer if you're struggling. But if you were getting everything right, great, the lesson is shorter. So there's some psychological benefits we saw. And the big reason why we were able to do this was we had a machine learning team. They've been fine-tuning the way the lessons are working. So we ran a few experiments where you could finish a lesson as few as 6 challenges. If you got everything right, it would just take 6 challenges. That actually did not work. 6 challenges was too few. You didn't feel like you were learning anything. So right now, if you could get everything right, I think you'll finish around 12 challenges. But that number is always changing, and we're running a lot of experiments to figure out what the best is. Yep.
So you said no more losing, so no more hearts. But even in the progress bar, would it move back?
It would move back, but you wouldn't. You couldn't ever just exit without getting everything. So the idea is, if you constantly getting things wrong, you'll still be in the lesson experience. You weren't kicked out to the home page or.
So it wouldn't, like progress bar won't move back, and then.
No, I don't think we could do negative. No, I think it might just float.
Well, I think they give you a clue down below.
Yeah. So
They give you a clue
yeah. So
down
for
below.
every time you get something wrong, we have feedback.
Yeah, so in teacher language, we would call that a scaffold.
Okay.
So you're supporting people along
Right.
the way, and that's why they don't
Right.
give up on their match.
Yeah, and a little note about our feedback is we have certain thresholds for accepting a wrong answer. So if we know it's a typo, we won't mark that wrong. And early on, we saw a lot of competitors would mark things wrong if you forgot the accent mark or you put an A instead of an E, but we could tell that you were giving the right concept. We would still mark that as correct. We'd also give feedback if you use a synonym. So if you said, car instead of vehicle, sometimes a concept would be good enough. We also let the community give you feedback. So if there's a concept you really are failing with, you could always click a button to see what a discussion is. And oftentimes, dozens of users that are familiar with the concept will give feedback on why you got this right or why you got this wrong. So we found that to be really helpful. Another challenge we have is, especially with our teachers, with our new product, is taming the information overload. I feel like this is a constant design challenge for any interface, which is we want to communicate as much as possible, but really identify what's the most important, what isn't. So our first concept for the teacher dashboard was to give educators a tool where they can see how all their students are performing. In a nutshell, we were thinking it would be a class roster. You could see what skill they're working on, what lesson, how many points did they earn. You could sort it by time frame, and it would be really simple. In practice, what we noticed was students were completing a bunch of lessons in multiple different course languages. So at a glance, a teacher can't see everything they want. They will see one student and have to scroll for days, and this was not a good experience. So we had to think about, all right, what is the most important information, and how can we elevate that? So we redesigned a little bit. We interviewed teachers. They said they wanted to know, are the students actually coming to Duolingo? I don't care how many points, but the notion of signing on, doing something on a regular basis was really important, almost like attendance. So we gave that piece of information. Are students coming? In this time frame, whether it's by week or month or whatever, how many days are the students coming? That was really important. Number of lessons was important, number of skills, and number of points. Now, if a teacher wanted to find out more granular information, we let them. You could dig in further. And this whole thing of embracing progressive disclosure was a really key principle for us. There's so much information, identify what the users actually want, still give them the flexibility to dig in deeper, but elevate what's important. This inspired our latest iteration of the dashboard. Many teachers didn't care about what skill or what lesson they were learning or how many points. They wanted kind of like a bookmark in a book, like get to chapter 7. I don't care how you got there. What did you do in one day? Did you do it in a month? I just want you to get to chapter 7. So we did a similar thing. We visualized course progress over the tree, give you a simple visualization for if that student got there or didn't get there. At a glance, you can see who's succeeding and who's struggling. And that simple 5-second glance is what many teachers wanted. Others wanted this granularity, some only wanted this. And again, I think it's a testament to having that constant dialogue with our end user. Another thing that we struggled with was this concept of getting strangers into users. So we embraced this philosophy of trying it before you buy it. Don't worry, Duolingo's always free. You're never going to buy it. But for a while, when you signed up for Duolingo, you had to fill out this form. It's pretty common. You select what language you want to learn, provide us your full name. Some people are hesitant to do that. Give us your email address. Some people don't want to do that because they'll feel like we'll get spammed. Come up with a username. After 2 million users, coming up with a unique username is almost impossible without using like 5, 6, 7, 9 Q at the end. So this was a huge burden. So we decided to change it up. Instead of requiring you to sign up, you just select your language. After you select your language, you're dropped into the Duolingo experience. This whole principle of trying it before you buy it, you get to taste what the experience is like. You get to see the value of experiencing the product before giving us any information about yourself. And also, a consequence of this is, as you invest more time and effort into the experience, you're more likely to sign up at the end. So after completing your first lesson, we'll prompt you, hey, to save your progress, sign up now. And we saw huge gains of this methodology across all apps. especially our mobile apps. If you think about most apps that you download, like a game, you could just dive right into the game. And especially as our users are thinking of us as a game, it was kind of odd for them to provide all that information. So we really embraced this whole concept of delayed sign up, trying out the product before committing to it. A final challenge that I thought was really unique to us was localizing. And we have 20 different languages that our interface is localized to. That's a lot. I would think most games only translate into English and maybe a few others. But since our market is so global, we want the Duolingo experience to feel native for anyone around the world. So we have 20 different UI languages. This restricts design in many ways. It slows down development because whenever we come up with a new feature, introduce new words, that takes another week for our moderators to help translate the UI. Even design gets complicated. So in English, this should say, what is your translator tier? But really complicated things happen. Like when I'm mocking up a design in English, I think about like, oh, well, what would the layout look like in English, but not realizing, certain elements on the interface get bumped down and switched around. You can always count on Russian to be twice as long as English. So I think it's a unique design challenge where you're thinking about things have to be so flexible. Even like right to left languages, like designing for Arabic was incredibly challenging. This alone was like a month endeavor. Simple things like this circular bar would fill up clockwise, fills up counterclockwise, like all these things you never think about. But we're really thankful we have, so localizing has been a challenge for us. And for many companies, they often use third-party services to localize all their stuff. But we did this all in-house, and it was made possible by this really fancy tool. We call it the incubator. So all courses on Duolingo are created by community volunteers. So people that are really passionate about a language will volunteer their time to create courses on Duolingo, create all the translations and localizations for the interface. And to make that experience easier, we created a tool. And this was really interesting design challenge was, can you create the PowerPoint for creating a language course? Like that was something really interesting. So now it almost feels like a game, but not really. But translators can click on a word, come up with all the different sentences that word can appear in, come up with a reverse translation. And this is the actual tool Duolingo's created on, and I thought that was really awesome. So what's next for Duolingo? Again, we believe everyone should have access to the best language education for free at the highest quality. In that regard, our mission really isn't complete until we have a wider reach throughout the world. At the moment, the United States has our highest traffic. Second to that would be Brazil and then Mexico. We're seeing huge gains in Asia, and we've only cracked the surface. Until we see a lot more international traffic, we don't feel like we've really fulfilled our mission. Disrupting the language certification industry would be a huge success. We know that there are tons of monopolies out there. It costs so much money, and we feel like we could do a better job for a fraction of the cost. Being able to help teachers become more effective in the classroom. Duolingo originally wasn't designed to be in the classroom, but we're seeing that these digital tools have the potential to help teachers make the most out of their time. Teachers are the most passionate people and care the most about their students. So if we could, flip the classroom, what if Duolingo could happen at home, and then we can tell the teacher the things to focus on in the classroom while they're having physical interactive time? That would be great. And finally, our goal is to prove that Duolingo is a scalable means of educating people throughout the world, sustaining that business model, and actually demonstrating that Duolingo's education is providing real language education and providing a better way to get a better life. That's it. Any questions? Yeah.
Question about your usability testing, which you talked about. So do you ever test the mock-ups or just the actual functional prototypes?
So mock-ups sometimes will test, but really we like to test the experience. And if we're able to prototype in a lower fidelity, we'll do that. So sometimes we'll use, it's quicker to prototype something in just HTML and CSS, we'll do that. If it's more of an interaction thing, sometimes we'll use tools like, even Keynote is really good, Balsamic, all the traditional prototyping tools. A lot of the times, if we're testing out a brand new flow, something that we've never done before, we'll try to prototype at a paper fidelity, so not even getting into the colors and the copy, but really just seeing if like the mental model of our design aligns with the mental model of the user. So we'll user test it in all different ways.
How do you recruit for that? Is it by language interest or is it just generically like across the range?
Recruiting for user testing is tough. We'll use Craigslist sometimes. The limitation of Craigslist is you're often recruiting the same kind of people in the same area. So we would get, since we're in Shadyside, we'll get college-age students, young adults that are of a middle class, that typically speak English as their native language. So we often have to be cognizant of the kind of testing we're doing based off of the kind of people we get. We could use services like usertesting.com is really great because they recruit around the world. You can give them a script and a link to a product, and they'll send you a film recording of it 20 minutes later. And since their reach is more global, you can get a better sense of what a typical user would be like. We'd like to think that if our product design is scalable, it doesn't really matter who uses it. So targeting a specific audience isn't a high priority. Sometimes we do notice that in parts of the world, some of our interactions don't make sense. We noticed in China, we have a speak challenge. You're given a line of text, you have to hold down a button and speak that sentence and then let go to finish your recording. But that interaction was really not clicking in China. So we made some tweaks there. But for the most part, the design and the interaction is global enough where we don't have to target too much. Yeah.
I'm curious, everything's free, to everybody, but you have this top of the line people like yourself working there. So how does your business model support like your staff and everything?
That's a great question. So we are thankful to have a lot of venture capital funding, which keeps us afloat. But our early business model was, I could go back, talking about reCAPTCHA, how we were crowdsourcing. reCAPTCHA was basically taking human effort to to decipher these characters while also digitizing books. So on Duolingo, if you log on to our website, you'll notice that after you reach some level of proficiency, we'll ask you, hey, there's an article, a real life article, written in the language you're learning. Help translate that into your native language. Now we'll give that article to you and 20 to 30 other students. If all of you are collaborating on that translation, the level of translation quality is as good as a professional translator. We'll then sell that translation back to the author. So right now we're translating articles for CNN. So that's one method of monetization. Our second method is the test center. Through the test center, we launched in January. So right now, people around the world are certifying their English proficiency $20 at a time. And we're also thinking about getting into more enterprise. So the dashboard was intended for teachers and schools, but we're noticing a lot of organizations want to train their staff in some language. So we might be able to sell some kind of power tool for businesses to certify their staff language.
Thank you.
How do you set your parameters around the iterations for how many that you might do for any given concept?
So first, at any given time, there are about 50 different A/B tests running. And an A/B test can run for as short as 7 days to as long as a few months. So as soon as we get feedback that we think is meaningful, we'll iterate based off that. So if it was successful, the next step would be pushing that feature to all users and then continue to observe the metrics. I would say Generally, it's a case-by-case basis. So really deciding what features we feel like will have the highest ROI, we'll iterate on more. So things like the splash page, we would iterate at like the second we got bad or good feedback, we would iterate the next day and push out a new design. So oftentimes we'll have a few iterations in mind and just wait until we can push them out. Yeah.
Do you do legal localization? I ask because.
Sorry?
Do you do legal localization?
Legal localization.
I ask because the first screenshot of the dashboard showed all of the student email addresses.
Mhm.
So that miniature heart attack.
Dashboard.
It was the one you had said was the first concept for it.
Oh, this. Yeah. Legal localization.
Like for local privacy laws or.
Yeah,
it's ultimately the school's
Right.
responsibility,
Right.
but.
So all of this stuff is post-password. So
Okay.
you can only view this after you log in and authenticate yourself as the observer. When you are, so we make it so that the user gets to decide whether or not to share their language process with another user. So they have to confirm that they can do that. As for like legal terms and privacy, that kind of stuff, we do not ask our moderators to translate that. Since we're based in the US, I believe we only have to worry about that. In the back.
Do kids use your app under 13?
I'm sure they do.
Or do you allow kids to use your app?
Yeah, we at the moment we don't restrict. I mean, if you have a device and you can download our app or get to Duolingo.com, you can use it.
What about basically the
COPA compliance.
With like even as I understand it, even translation, if it's done on a server, includes sending their voice to the server.
Yeah.
Do you do that, or is that locus, the speech recognition?
So speech recognition is done client side. So no audio is being transmitted across servers or stored anywhere. At the moment, if you could log on to Duolingo by any means, you are able to use Duolingo. Yeah.
Well, I was wondering, and I don't know if anybody's brought it up, so I teach 6 to 9-year-olds. And so I was really excited about this because our elementary school, due to funding, like so many schools, the first thing we lost was language, and we had Spanish. And so I'm fluent in Spanish, but there is a time in the day for me to actually teach it. So then when I heard about Duolingo, I said, well, I can log my kids on, and then when they have time on the computer or their choice time, it involves reading, it involves writing, so actually writing in English. And so I thought what I can do is they can be doing work on their own, or they were really excited to have the account at home. And then I can still just do even just some commands and things like that in the classroom. So maybe there's a way that I could teach them without it necessarily being a part of the curriculum. But the question that I'm trying to get to is that, so kids younger than mine that can't read, they wouldn't be able to read that initial sentence, and they wouldn't be able to write anything. Has anybody asked? Are you looking to do anything for kids that can't yet write?
That's an interesting question. Formally, we've never done any investigation to that, but certainly has come up as a lunchtime conversation for like, what if we could teach to that level of experience.
Right.
At the moment, I don't think it aligns with the priorities. I think we're still trying to pursue the adult market. We feel like there's a lot to tap into there, but certainly I wouldn't write it off if sometime
No, I
down
was
the
just
road we get
curious.
to.
I'm not saying it's something you have to do. I was just curious because even what I found is even once some of those basic things like translate this sentence or type this, for some of my first graders that couldn't read those multisyllabic words yet, once I told them what it meant, you know, the kids, they catch on so quick and they love it. They absolutely
It's
love it.
awesome. Like you could look on YouTube of videos of a 1-year-old using their parents' iPhone without knowing how to read. It's pretty fascinating. We hope one day we can get to that. Yeah.
We're actually out of
Okay.
time, so if you guys have more questions for him, I'm sure he can follow up with you guys. Thank you for
Thank you.
talking.